So my name is Becky Thompson. I'm president at Homeschool Connections currently, and I homeschooled 3 of my 4 kids, one all the way through. I did one was a combo of and then 2 were a combo of public and homeschool, and then actually our oldest was a public and private. And then also I've been able to help homeschool our grandson for the past 3 years. So that's been really great and a new experience. We've personalities, and it depended on if I was doing 2 at a time or 1 at a time or what was going on in life. So kind of run the gamut there. I've been with Homeschool Connections since 2012. Well, working with Homeschool Connections since 2012. And my kids took classes. I will say this is not a Homeschool Connections informational thing, even though we're putting it on, or I'm putting it on. But I will tell people about Homeschool Connections at the end if they want to hear about it. Not a sales pitch. This is truly just to help people when they're looking for curriculum. I know it's overwhelming, and there's just so much out there. Even since I started, there's just so much out there. And so to pare it all down before you even start looking into options, that's the philosophy I've kind of gone with, is know what you're looking for before you just Google, and maybe you have already, but if you just Google like the best homeschool curriculum, well, there's a million of them. So it's really nice to pare it down first before you get going. So I am going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to share my screen, and if people pop on, then I will let them in. As I said in the email, this is being recorded. And so, but it will only record the person that is speaking. So that's why if you keep your mic off, you won't get recorded. Your face won't get recorded. It will record presentation and me. And then you're welcome to put questions in the chat. Erin's gonna kind of keep an eye on the chat for me, and she can pop off her mic and then ask, say, oh, there's a question that you need to address, because when I'm going through the presentation, I can't also see the chat. Unfortunately, Google Meet doesn't work that way. So that is how we will do it. And then at the end, I'll be happy to take questions, and we can kind of chit chat about personal recommendations and things like that. So with that, I will go ahead and share my screen. So welcome, everyone. I'm so glad that you are joining tonight. This is just an overview of choosing curriculum. I'm not going to go into every single curriculum there is. I can't go into every single curriculum there is. There are way too many. But I really want this to be a learning experience for you and help you feel more confident and comfortable, take away some of the stress of choosing a curriculum. And so I'm going to go through my presentation, and feel free to put your comments in the chat, and we'll get to those. And at the end, we'll do a Q&A. Okay. All right. So let's get started with what I think are the top 3 considerations that you should be looking at when you're choosing a curriculum. First, you want to consider your child's unique learning style. And I will throw in, you should consider also your learning style, because it's really important that you are going to jive with the curriculum as well. It's a whole family approach, in my opinion. Then second, you're going to look at your educational philosophy. So you want to decide, like, what is the way that I want to know about educating my child or my children. And then finally, you want to decide what type of curriculum is going to fit into your lifestyle. You're looking at time considerations, budget, outside activities that you do, and you really want to make sure that it's going to mesh with the rest of your life. Okay. So those are the top three things that I think that you should consider. And I have to say, I've not done a webinar in a while, so I'm a little rusty at like reading and talking. So I'm sorry if I stumble a little bit here. All right, so learning styles. The top three learning styles, or the main learning styles, are visual learners, auditory learners, and kinesthetic learners. Most people have probably already heard of these. Visual learners really like colorful charts, diagrams, instructions. They do well generally learning on their own, as well as learning alongside other people. Auditory learners really like it when information is presented through discussions or audible or audio verbal explanations. I had one of these. One of my kids is an auditory learner. And so we did a lot of read alouds and then telling back, which we'll talk about Charlotte Mason's style, but that is the style that really he thrived in the best. And then the kinesthetic learners, which a lot of kids lean towards this with like a little bit of visual or auditory thrown in. So that's hands-on. They want activity-based. They want experiments. They don't just want you to tell them 1 + 1 is 2. They want you to show them and let them get their hands in there and figure it out. In my opinion, the best way to figure out what their primary learning style is just to watch them. You know them best. But there are so many free quizzes online. And then a lot of the quizzes online too will go into more also their personality types. So if that's something that you're interested in, that's something that you could look at. But I just want to say that most people aren't just one type of style. And so make sure that you keep that in mind when you're choosing curriculum or looking at their style or what aligns with their style of learning. And people tend to grow and change along the way. Like I mentioned, kinesthetic learners, a lot of kids are kinesthetic learners, but then they'll move more into visual or auditory as they get older and their personality develops. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about different educational philosophies. There are so many educational philosophies out there. We're going to touch on the most common tonight. And I did put a link and I sent you all the notes. And it does have this link in it too. There's a really great blog post by Common Sense Press that goes through all of these in a lot more detail than I'm going to be able to cover tonight with other links and resources. So I highly recommend that after tonight's webinar, maybe tomorrow or before you really dive in, that you read that blog post. It's really great. Okay. So the first type of educational philosophy that we're going to talk about is traditional education. So this is more school at home. So it is more textbook based. You're going to have, well, most curriculums these days, if they're an all-in-one or even if they're not, they're going to have some sort of teaching guide. But this would have you're going to check things off. You are going to move from one subject to the next subject. It's very built on like practice and tests and things like that. One of my kids really thrived in a traditional education style. She had been public schooled and that was just her preferred way of learning. And so we just kind of continued that. And then sprinkled in some other things as well. This style really fits well if your family or your child really likes steady routine. They really like clear expectations. And they want to know, they want to be able to check something off and know that they know it and they can move on to the next thing. It doesn't work great with kids who really want to be out exploring or doing or hands-on learners. So a lot of times this is more of a route that you would take with an older child, and especially an older child that's more focused on maybe going to college later or getting into some sort of academic field. And again, I have a link and in the notes that I sent you that also has this link, but there are quite a few traditional educational curriculums out there. These are kind of the originals that came out. So Abeka, BJU Press, Broad and Staff. I would also throw in, oh gosh, now I can't think of, Sunlight into this category mixed with our next one, which is classical education style. I didn't put that in there, but Sunlight is also one that I would consider more of a traditional education. Okay, so our next one, and then I'll pause and check the chat. So if there's anything that you want to put in the chat, go ahead and do that now. And we're going to cover classical education. So classical education, there's a really great book out there if you're really interested in classical education. It's called Teaching the Trivium. And I'll email that later too if anybody's interested in it, like a link to that book. I read it when I was prepping to homeschool, and it really did help me understand different stages of learning, even though I didn't follow a classical education model the entire time. So the stages of classical education are grammar, logic, and rhetoric. So at the grammar stage, that's the younger kids. They're going to start with more concrete. They start by learning facts. For example, if they're going to be learning math, really easy example, 1 + 1 is 2. You're going to go ahead and teach them that. Then when they get to the next stage, the logic stage, they're going to move into understanding more ideas behind the mathematical facts that they've learned. And then in the rhetoric stage, they would learn to tell other people or be able to teach other people. So it really builds upon, you circle back to ideas that you covered before, and then you build upon it. There's a lot of rich stories, critical thinking. There's a lot of like virtue and more work on how they're relating to the outside world. It is very good for families who love reading. And it isn't textbook based for the most part. It is based with what Charlotte Mason would call living books. So those are books that are not textbooks. It's something that you could go check out from the library. So instead of having like an American history textbook, you would read firsthand accounts, or you would go and get a book that explains like the way our government works. So of course at the different levels for the different kids. This isn't a great fit if you don't have kids that like to read, or that you don't like to sit and read, because there is a lot of reading in a classical education. And so there are some great classical education curriculums out there. Veritas Press, I have several friends who use Veritas Press, Memoria Press, Classical Academic Press, and then there is Classical Conversations. Classical Conversations is actually a homeschool group. A lot of people think of it as a co-op. It's not really a co-op, although you do have to be involved with the program, but you do pay for it. And it is a group where you would go through that classical education with other homeschoolers. So very much more in not a school type scenario, but going through with other people. All right, I'm going to pause for a second and go back and just check our chat and make sure, see if anyone has questions. No questions so far. So we will move on to our next educational style, which is Charlotte Mason, which is my personal favorite for young kids. I think it is a really brilliant model that focuses on books, time outdoors, and short, meaningful lessons, not a lot of long lessons. I find that a lot of kids really thrive in this educational style, especially ones that like to be outside, for families that really like to be outside and they don't want to have to just be inside, with a desk and doing that kind of like workbook and things like that. It is not great for if you want workbooks, if you want regular testing. I used this style with my youngest, and he didn't take a test until he was in middle school. So it's a great way if you really want to dive into really getting to know your kids, and you really have to know, like, do they know this? It also works a lot with writing and repeating back what you've heard. It's called narration. So you will do a read aloud, and then the kids will tell you back what they heard. So this is a really great one. Some great curriculum options for this style are Simply Charlotte Mason, Ambleside Online, which is a free curriculum guide. It's similar to, oh, that's the one I was trying to remember when I was talking about traditional, was Easy Peasy Homeschooling, which is totally online, totally free. They're very different styles, but there are some really great free options out there for homeschooling, especially if you're willing to utilize the library. You can do a lot for free. I don't have any experience with Heart of Dakota personally, but I know that it's a great curriculum. And then my personal favorite is My Father's World, and that blends classical and Charlotte Mason, and that's what I used with our youngest. All right. Let's see. I'm going to move on to the next slide here. And we'll talk a little bit about Montessori learning. Montessori, if you're familiar at all, there are lots of Montessori schools, and was created by, I can't remember her first name, but her last name is Montessori. It is really lovely for younger kids. It does really not translate, or there's not a lot of curriculum for going past like the early elementary years, but it is really great for families who like to have like stations. Yes, thank you, Erin. Maria Montessori. I should have remembered that. So you set up little stations and you go between the stations. There are so many materials that are out there for this, but this is a pretty pricey one to do at home because it requires like specific little stations. You can find a lot of the stuff secondhand. I don't know if anyone is familiar. Maybe you can put in the chat if you've heard of Love Every. Love Every is a subscription, and it's Montessori based, and it's from 0 to 5 years. And I have gifted it to our grandkids, and it's really awesome. Love Montessori style. It's just not something that you can continue the whole way through. It's really great if your kids love to have like a routine, and if they are good with doing things on their own, and you can kind of let them go and do this little project, and then you could do something. So it's really great for that aspect, but it's not great if you don't have independent kids, or honestly, I feel like if you have a handful of kids that you're trying to homeschool that are older, this wouldn't be a great option. All right, let me move on to the next slide. I keep coming back to so I can see what's going on, if anything's in the chat. All right, unit studies. This is a fantastic way to homeschool if you have multiple ages of kids that you're homeschooling. And not to say that it's not great if you only have one child. If your child gets really interested in one particular subject and wants to explore that particular subject, this is a fantastic way to go. Definitely, I did this when I had a couple kids that I was homeschooling. We did our science and our social studies and our Bible all together. And we would build them around a particular topic. And then I would branch off for their math and language arts at the, well, really just their math, because this includes language arts as well. So say that your kids are really interested in ocean life. You would take the ocean and you would use that for all your subjects. So you would use for math, you could do something like volume, measuring fluids and things like that, or, sand, things like that. You could talk about how like octopi have 8 legs and go into what that means and the symmetry and things like that. So there's a lot that you can do with it. Then you would, of course, do science based on the ocean. You would read books about the ocean. They would write about the ocean. And some parents just go ahead and put all that together themselves. But there are a lot of curriculum that actually put it all together for you. So there's Gather Round, Winter Promise, Layers of Learning. There's another one that I didn't put on there, Konos. I'll add that to the notes too later. Konos is a really great one. This doesn't work well for kids who really want structure, or families that really need that structure, that want a more traditional feel. But it's really great for creative kids, and even just to use it, like I said, like part of it for if you have more than one kid that you're homeschooling. Okay. Unschooling. There are lots of big feelings about unschooling out there. I think it has gotten a bad rap personally, because people think that unschooling is just not doing anything. And that is not the case. Unschooling is based on what your child wants to learn. And it's not necessarily, you're not putting together like a study on oceans. You're letting them just go and explore ocean life as they want to do it. So you're not necessarily like making them focus on math at a particular time. It works well for families who enjoy freedom, want open schedules, are really into child-led learning. It doesn't work well if your child isn't a driven learner or a natural learner, because they are not going to naturally want to learn about things that they need to know to be successful in life. And that's where it gets a bad rap. I think people might try it that don't have the aptitude for it, or the kids have the aptitude for it, which is why, going back to the beginning, you need to know your child first before you dive into any of these methods. All right. And then there's eclectic homeschooling, which is where most people end up. I know very few people in all my years of homeschooling and working at Homeschool Connections that actually start with one curriculum and one educational style and follow it the entire way through, myself included. Most people are going to start with one particular curriculum or method, and then as their children grow, as their lives change, they're going to maybe, well, that's not really working for us anymore, and need to change it up. I know one of you said at the beginning that's kind of where you are, like what you started with isn't really working anymore. And that's when people start to get into eclectic homeschooling. So you might, for instance, say math might be a traditional So you're going to use a very traditional workbook or textbook-based math. Believe it or not all math curriculums are textbook-based. There's lots of hands-on curriculums, even through the older years. But then you might say, well, for science, we're much more of like a Charlotte Mason style. We're going to go out, we're going to do some nature journaling, and I'm not going to really worry about diving into just like a traditional science textbook for them, because that's not really where we're headed in life, or they're headed in life. And then you might say, well, for language arts and for social studies, I really like pairing those two things together. And so we're going to do like more of a unit study. So we're going to learn about the American Revolution, and then we're going to dive into literature from that time, and do some writing based on that time period. And some great resources, and I didn't put them on here, but I will put some individual great resources and email them all to you. I don't expect you to write this all down, but some great resources for doing that is IEW, which is Institute for Excellence in Writing. MathUC is a really great one that you can do one-off very easily. And there is just such a myriad of history or language arts courses to do. But a few that come top of mind are Knotgrass History, and while just going to your library and picking up things, Story of the World is a really great one. So I'll put some more of those resources together, or more pick and choose, and I'll email them to everyone at the end, and just kind of with a little more explanation. I meant to add those to this slide, but I think I ran out of room. All right. So then I want to talk a little bit about, well, I'm going to go back, and I just want to make sure that nothing, do we have any questions? Yeah. Oh, Aaron said, yeah, MathUC and IEW, those are really popular ones. They really are great. So that's fantastic. So when you're thinking about what curriculum you want to use, and what style you want to choose, I think it's really important too to think about if you want to join a co-op, use a drop-off program. And I didn't put it in here on this slide, but we'll talk about it a little bit later, other things that are going on in your life. So co-ops, in case you're not familiar, are where homeschoolers come together and they cooperate. That's why they're called co-ops. So they're going to, they're all set up a little bit differently, but basically the parents are teaching the classes. Most of them are going to be once a week, and the classes that are set up are going to be based on what the parents decide, what the parents can teach, things like that. And then what's great about co-ops is they are mostly focused on just getting the kids together, and not really so much about like covering a whole bunch of different subjects. They're very community-based, and we had great experiences at co-ops personally. A lot of families don't have great experiences at co-ops. It really depends on who's there, because some people are going to take it very seriously and really prepare for their lessons, and really want to do a great job. And then some people are just there for the socialization, so they're not really worried about what kind of lesson they're preparing. And that brings me to drop-off programs. Homeschool Connections is a drop-off program. I kind of said at the beginning before everyone was on, but this is not a commercial for Homeschool Connections, but I do want to tell you a little bit about it. We were founded by Charla Gerner, and we're going into our 25th year. A drop-off program like Homeschool Connections We hire the teachers, we background check the teachers, and you're not responsible to stay there and contribute in teaching or watching kids or anything like that. Drop programs often will teach an entire subject for you, especially in the older years. So say you are like, I don't want to teach algebra. A drop-off program is a great option for that. The way that ours works is we're once a week. I like to think of it as like a community college for homeschoolers. So we're going to go ahead and teach one day a week and then give homework for the rest of the week, and there'll be resources or a curriculum that's going to go with that. Again, very community minded. Most drop-off programs are. We certainly are. We also have field trips and webinars and workshops and different things like that. And then actually, I didn't put it on here, but I just thought about this. There's also groups that are just based on like doing field trips or doing park meetups, things like that. And those are really great too. So there are a lot of outside opportunities for your kids to learn besides just a curriculum at home. I just want to read this comment from Erin because this sounds really good. She says, my sister is homeschooling and she does something they call a learning circle where she met and clicked with a couple other homeschool moms and they essentially do a micro co-op together. Yeah, that's awesome. That's really awesome. And I've heard of this too, where if you can find other like-minded families in your area, you can get together and do, you know, your lessons together. And it doesn't have to be with a large group of people. So that's really awesome. Thank you, Erin, for sharing that with us. If you want to know more about Homeschool Connection, I'm happy to talk about that more at the end. Or you can go and join one of our orientations. Those are listed on our website. We're always happy to talk about that. But I want to move on and finish up some last thoughts here that I think are really important to consider. Budget planning and free resources. So I talked a little bit about some free resources. Homeschooling can be almost completely free if you want to do it that way, and it can cost you a lot of money. I think a lot of new homeschoolers feel like they have to buy the whole new thing. I certainly did, and I really enjoyed it, to be honest with you. And if that's in your budget and that's something that's important to you and makes you excited, I say go for it. But there's also curriculum sales, and there's groups, there's Facebook groups where you can buy used curriculum or share. And there's tons of free resources. I mentioned Easy Peasy earlier. Khan Academy is a great free resource. So that is something to consider, is how much you want to spend on homeschool resources. Another thing that you really want to consider is how much time it's going to take. So if you are looking at a traditional, a classical, those two are the most time consuming. And even if you're looking at an all-in-one, and this happened to me even with my Father's World, which I love and totally recommend, but if you're trying to check off all those boxes in the teacher's manual, it can take some time. And homeschooling doesn't have to take a ton of time if that's not your bent. If your family is very academic minded and your kids are that way and you're that way, I say go for it. It really can be a great time together. I learned so much that I had either missed or forgotten in school, homeschooling my own kids. And I am really a kind of an academic minded person when it comes to like learning history and things like that. I love to read books. I will sit and just read and read. But some of my kids weren't like that. And so then we brought in more field trips and videos and things like that. So when you're thinking about a curriculum, think about how much time it's going to take you, how much time you want to give to it, and what other things in your family are important to give your time to. So you might be really you might be homesteading. I know a lot of people are doing that these days, including myself a little bit. You might have a really close relationship with a lot of like family or friends, and that's really important to you. You might do lots of sports, etc. You know what I mean? And then make it personal. So one of the things that I really like to do with my older kids when I was homeschooling them, especially the ones that were in public school and came home, is I asked them how they wanted to learn and what curriculum like looked interesting to them. I think that's really important. And I think it's something that we kind of skip over. We think, oh, I want to do the classical model and this is what I'm going to do. And no matter if it seems appealing or not, that's what I think. I want to just invite you, as it were, to really make it about you and your kids together and what feels right to you. And don't let the pressure of, oh, everybody is doing this. Like, I feel like everyone is doing the good and the beautiful right now. I have nothing against the good and the beautiful, but I feel like we get on this trend and then everybody thinks that is the best one. There is no best one. There is no one. And so I want to say, to wrap up, start small, be flexible. Don't feel pressured to purchase an entire curriculum at once. A lot of curriculums do have samples online too that you can download. Start with 1 or 2 subjects. Even this summer, as we go into the summer, if something looks really enticing to you, maybe try to find like a piece of it used and test it out over the summer. See what works for your family. Be willing to adapt your approach as you learn what works with you, your child, all of your learning styles. And if you're doing more than one child, sometimes you just really have to blend things together and trust your instincts. You know your child better than anyone else. And research and recommendations are really valuable, but trust your intuition when you're making decisions. What works for one family might not be the best fit for yours. And you've got this. So